So I was all ready to go to make a video about David Fincher, and then I realized, wait a minute, I already have made a video about David Fincher. So I'm going to play that, and then I'm going to add any comments I think I may have not left out, or any new comments I might have. Fincher, Psychopaths, and Paths, and Mindhunter. I'm going to talk about David Fincher, the director, who was, I was reminded of him because of Leonard Lawrence, my number one fan, because my number two fan, because I'm my number one fan, and because I don't have any other fans. Right, so I'm going to talk about David Fincher, then I'm going to talk about my theory on psychopaths, and then I'm going to talk about the show Mindhunter, which was produced by David Fincher, and which is about psychopaths. So here's a list of David Fincher's movies in case you're not familiar. The earliest one I know of is Alien 3. He got very big with the movie 7. Then he did Fight Club. I think that was right after that. He developed a friendship, I think, with Brad Pitt, which was the only reason he made that abominable movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is like the stupidest movie. It's the stupidest idea. Everything about it is awful, except for the directing, because David Fincher is that good. He did the movie The Zodiac, which is about a serial killer, the Zodiac Killer, which I think is incredible. It's starring Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal. I think it's incredible. Not so much for the story, but for the directing. It's so easy to watch. It's so much fun, which is weird for a movie about a psychopath. But even though he doesn't shy away from the darkness of it, it's so much fun. It's so hard to even describe, because I'm not an expert in directing or cinematography. I don't even know the difference, really. He made The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I thought was terrible. I only saw it once, though, but it's just not my cup of tea. I only saw it once. I was probably drunk at the time, so I can't comment on it. He made The Social Network, which again I thought was pretty forgettable. But again, the directing is the only it's saving grace. I don't know the other movies he did. Maybe I've seen some of them and I don't know that he directed them. Maybe I can't think of them right now. Maybe both. Alien 3, as I was saying earlier to Leonard Lawrence, reminds me of Terminator Salvation, because the fans hate it, I think, both of them. However, I respect both of them. I actually really enjoyed Terminator Salvation, but Alien 3, I think, like Terminator Salvation, it takes the concept seriously enough to follow it through. It's well done for what it is. You might not like what it is, but it does what it is to the highest. What am I trying to say? It's hard to say that. Well, it's basically like a bad idea done really well. It would be like if you were to make a story about a pile of shit that meets, a donkey, and it's a love story. Well, it's a terrible idea. I don't see how that could do well. But if David Fincher were to direct it, it would end up kind of similar to maybe Alien 3 or Terminator Salvation. So it was a bad idea, I guess, to begin with, but it was done really well, executed really well, and with discipline, and it was fleshed out, and someone took it really seriously and worked hard on it. It would be like the piece of shit and the donkey demonstrate real character growth, and the love affair has layers. And I guess Benjamin Button would be the literal... Benjamin Button is literally worse than a movie about a piece of shit and a donkey falling in love. So there you go, that's even a better example. 7 I initially hated because I don't like dark subject matter, but upon subsequent viewings, I really was amazed at how easy it is and fun it is to watch. And I credit that to David Fincher's directing. I would say the exact same thing about Fight Club. I thought Fight Club was too cool, and I hated the way all the cool little dorks, all the youngsters, all the young little punk wannabes who thought they were badass, I hated how much they loved it. I started a Fight Club when I was 16, before the stupid movie. I was always like, I did it first. My one and only issue with David Fincher is his hiring of Trent Reznor to do the music for his movies. Because I've always believed, ever since I first heard of Trent Reznor, when he first came out, because I was at that age, I was like 16 when he was getting big, is that he's this wannabe, again, like the way I view all of those music people. Even Nirvana, that's exactly how I viewed them. These stupid, immature, wannabe artists, like tough guys. Trent Reznor really always made me sick. With no talent whatsoever, at all, who, of course, burnt out as soon as their gimmick got stale, which was, I think, like after 2 years. So I just scratch my head. I just can't believe. For David Fincher to hire Trent Reznor, what's an analogy? It would be like Stanley Kubrick using like Green Day to write the music for his movies. Which actually makes me think maybe David Fincher's big weakness is maybe he just doesn't have much of an ear for music. Because maybe the music in his movies is the weakest part. Because now that I think about it, I've never remarked to myself, wow, that's good music, whenever hearing a David Fincher soundtrack to one of his movies. And now that I think of it, yeah, he used Trent Reznor, I Want to Fuck You Like an Animal. He used that at the beginning or the end of Seven. So he's obviously been a long-time fan. But grow up, okay? You're a great director. You don't need this shit, this bubblegum crap. And like, also, you're too old to be listening to that kind of shit. I outgrew it when I was 8. Speaking of being 8, and I'll get to that though. But first, okay, so David Fincher produced and directed many episodes of this TV show called Mindhunter, which was also produced by Charlize Theron. I'm not sure what maybe she's the one who found it. That's probably what it is. She discovered it and showed it to David Fincher, and he was like, wow, okay, I'll do it, and you can get a production credit. Because I've never heard of her being creative at all, and she does shit with Seth MacFarlane, so I have no respect for her whatsoever. Yeah, I really got to get away from pop culture. I know too much. I know way more than I need to. I don't want to know who these people are anymore. Call it a guilty pleasure that I overindulge in, like eating too much cake with an overweight person. In the case of an overweight person. Anyways, Mindhunter is a great show, and it's about the early work that the FBI agents did, in 2 of them in particular, researching the minds of serial killers in order to figure out how to catch them. They even were the ones that invented the word serial killer, the term. And it's great. And just like everything David Fincher does, it's fun to watch, even though it's so morbid and dark. Oh, and thank God Trent Reznor didn't write the soundtrack, because I don't know if I could handle it if he did. Season 2 is actually coming out in a month or 2. I have a theory about psychopaths, which I think has been confirmed by Mindhunters, so I'm really amazed at my brilliance. I mean, I never even studied psychopaths. I hate studying serial killers. I've never had a fascination. I've never wanted to read a book or had any interest in their lives. I think they're idiots. I don't think they're geniuses. But I guess I just study a lot of assholes because I meet a lot of them. And then I just see traits and I'm like, that's like a psychopath. Okay, so this, I guess, started when I was like 13, and I read in high school about some psychology about how... Actually, not in high school, because I learned nothing in high school. I read some, like, something... I don't know who came up with this idea, but the idea that the first stage of awareness and consciousness is like, okay, a baby doesn't understand that when their parent leaves the room, that their parent is actually going somewhere. They just think when their parent leaves the room, their parent ceases to exist. Because they almost see everything two-dimensionally. So my idea was that stupid people are basically people who have never matured past a certain age. So the stupidest of all, they actually think that when people leave the room, they stop existing. Children who are 8 years old, when they pull the wings off a fly, because they marvel at their ability to destroy something, and they don't realize that they're hurting something. Now, when a girl is interested in a guy who rides a motorcycle and who like acts like a tough guy and drinks or something, I say that that girl is basically at the maturity level of like a 14-year-old, because only a 14-year-old thinks that that's hot. Anybody at the age of, like if you're at the maturity of 18, realizes that that's ridiculous and it looks stupid. And that guy riding the motorbike with the leather jacket on is at the maturity level of maybe like a, well, let's be honest, like a, okay, he's at the maturity level of a 14-year-old. She's at the maturity level of like a 12-year-old. Because he thinks it's cool and she thinks it's cool. Or like a girl that thinks a guy, when he throws a tantrum, that makes him powerful. Again, it's like a 12-year-old, because only a 12-year-old would think that's powerful. A real adult would think that that's really sad. And then he looks embarrassing, that it's humiliating the way he's behaved. And same with taking responsibility for yourself. I always say the difference between a child and an adult is that a child likes taking more than giving, and the adult likes giving more than taking. So an adult prefers giving presents on Christmas, and a child prefers getting Christmas presents. And a lot of people that I meet who are old, like my age, 40, they still care more about taking than giving. So I just call them children. And I guess needless to say, they're really stupid people. And mature people are generally smarter, because they read books and stuff, because they realize leather jackets are not as cool as books. So my theory about psychopaths is that they're not 12-year-olds. They're not the level of maturity of a 12-year-old. They're at like the level of like a 8-year-old or even a 6-year-old. Their maturity was stunted by whatever trauma that happened. So it's basically a 6-year-old you're talking to. And they like pulling the wings off flies and hurting people, because they don't realize that those people exist. They just think, all they see is that they feel powerful. So getting back to Mindhunter, I was rewatching this show in the last couple of days, and the one character goes, psychopaths don't have any feelings though, right? They don't have any emotions though, do they? And the other character goes, oh, they do have emotions. They just don't think other people do. Or more specifically, they don't think that that other people have an internal mind, like life. I think it was interior lives. So I think I'm entirely right about all of this, that I've been thinking about psychopaths and about assholes. Yeah, they don't realize that other people are people because they're immature, because 8-year-olds don't realize that either, and that's why they're so hurtful. That's why kids are so mean in school. Oh, and another thing that stuck out to me, and first I'm going to preface this with, I always preface everything so people never know where I'm going. That Ted Bundy show that they had, it was so interesting to me how everybody thought he was so smart, but you see him in court and he's acting like a child, thinking that he's impressing everybody, thinking that he's so smart, but he didn't get what he wanted. In fact, he made his situation much worse. I never heard of him saying anything smart or doing anything smart. He was acting entirely like a child. And it stuck out to me that psychopaths seem to think that they're very smart. That's the big difference. They're not smart. They just think they are. And that was also kind of confirmed in the Mindhunter show, because they're constantly saying how these serial killers don't see themselves as psychopaths or murderer, crazy. They all think that they're special, and they all think, oh, I'm nothing like those other serial killers. Those guys were all idiots. I'm smart. So I think that's the one quality they all have, is that they all think they're like super geniuses. But, I mean, unless you think there's something genius about killing somebody brutally, or like killing a child or cutting a head off, I don't see any signs of genius at all. And again, in this whole entire season of Mindhunter, never once do the people studying the serial killers ever say that any of these guys are very intelligent. They might say that they're well behaved, or that they are articulate, but they never say that they're like geniuses. Not once. And although for me it may be extremely emotionally difficult, impossible, unimaginable to even hurt somebody rather than kill somebody. Kill somebody would just be impossible. There is not anything hard about killing somebody and getting away with it, like in terms of the intellect required. When you kill a stranger, it's very easy to get away with it. That's why they get away with it. If you support gays, click like. If you respect blacks, comment. If you think women are people too, click the notification bell. And if you care about sick children, subscribe. Oh, a couple more thoughts. One of the serial killers on the show, and by the way, these serial killers on this show are actually, they're based on real serial killers, and much of their dialogue is literally verbatim taken from the actual serial killer. So one of the serial killers says that it was Ed Kemper, that he killed them because it made him feel like a hunter and them like the prey. And the first thing I thought was, that's interesting. They think they're dominant or that they're alpha males, but they're absolutely not. I mean, if anything, they're cowards who have been beaten into submission by their mothers. They've been abused and broken. And alpha males, they usually lead a pack. These serial killers aren't leading anybody. They're outcasts. They're complete failures socially. Like an alpha male a psychopath who would be an alpha male or a hunter, whatever, would be more like a CEO of a corporation who's actually achieved something. These serial killers achieve nothing, really. They go to jail for life. And I mean, though a lion actually will pick on the most wounded, or the baby deer, or whatever the hell they hunt. I don't know anything about wildlife. They don't, at least they get food out of it. The serial killers don't really get anything out of what they're doing. Anything real, except for their jollies or like some temporary emotional pleasure. But even that is it's nothing. I mean, would a rapist be an alpha male or a hunter? I really don't think of them like that. I think of them as cowards. And let that be a lesson to anybody who admires serial killers, because there's nothing to admire. They're the biggest losers, as far as I can tell. I mean, I can relate. Of course you can relate. That's the sick part. To some things they say. Like one of them says, again, Ed, he's the most interesting one, Ed Kemper, that women, they're weaker than men, so they have to find ways of, other ways of hurting them. Or whatever. Not literally what he said, but, and yeah, we've all thought that. But that's a defeatist attitude toward women. That's what you say when you've been defeated and you can't get women. I mean, for me, anyway, a real hunter when it comes to sexual attraction or women, a real alpha male or whatever, is somebody who can actually get the woman, who can actually have the woman be in love with them. I mean, a friend of mine once said, he goes, for me, it's not about sex, it's about having them fall in love with me. And he wasn't the nicest guy. He wasn't the best guy. He never let himself fall in love with them. He just, his game was to get them to fall in love with him, and then he'd drop them. So he was a terrible person. But I would say that's a level higher than trying to, kill them or rape them or something. I mean, that would be more of like a real mind hunter, because he's hunting their minds. So, but then again, the show is about the FBI agents hunting the minds of the serial killers. So I guess the title's appropriate. But I never really liked that title, Mind Hunter. So the FBI agents are hunting the minds of the serial killers, and the serial killers are hunting their mothers. Okay, so I must have made that video 7 years ago, because I'm 47 now, and in that video I say I'm 40. I'm glad that most of that video was about the show Mindhunter, because I have more to say about David Fincher's other movies. Okay, so it's notable that Alien 3 was David Fincher's first movie, right? Because before then, he was making music videos like Vogue, Madonna's Vogue. So he's like an industry director, right? He worked his way up. And I guess this was his big chance to make a movie. Oh, he also did Janie's Got a Gun by Aerosmith, which is also, I think one of the two of the only good Aerosmith songs there are. And by good, I mean not terrible. And apparently Alien 3 was a big fight between Fincher and the studios. It was one of those terrible, probably all too common situations where the director's not allowed to do his vision and the studio wants to get involved, and they say, hey, throw a silly blue hat into the movie. Put it in... Or hey, my nephew wants to be an actor. Can you make him a sidekick? 7, I briefly touched on. I can just add that
People were pleased that Gwyneth Paltrow's head was finally put to good use. The color palette of the movie was great. It was just like flawlessly made. And, you know, Fincher, like most directors, was very lucky to get such a good screenplay. So, all props to the writer, or most props to the writer, and some props to David Fincher. I would say though that even whenever it was that I watched it, I didn't watch it in the theaters. I watched it on video. The whole idea at the end, where the killer says, "Oh, when you see what's gonna happen, what I've got to show you, it's gonna change the world forever. It's gonna change everything." No, it wouldn't. Like, it's just so silly. Like, that wouldn't change anything. That wouldn't change the world. It would just be a freak occurrence. It would just be another serial killer. But, like, give me a break. It's not going to change the world. Then David Fincher made The Game, which I didn't bother putting a picture up for because it was just so stupid and forgettable. Just a very dumb movie. Then came Fight Club, which I think David Fincher really should have toned down the cool. It was just too cool. If they had toned down the cool, it would have improved the movie and made it more profound. And they could also have toned down the comedic elements. It didn't have to be that silly. Like, they were purposely making it silly at times. Also, it's notable that the author of Fight Club also wrote a book. I think he wrote a book that was made into a movie starring James McAvoy, in which the James McAvoy character has a split personality where he thinks he's a woman too. And so this author seems to have written more than one book about someone with two personalities, and also more than one book where the main character goes to like these, what do you call it? You know, like Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, or like, you know, just these meetings, that group meetings where people, you know, offer hugs to each other for, like, whatever, breast cancer meetings. So that's not the first story that this author's written where he's done that. And the whole twist at the end felt sort of gimmicky, contrived. We'd already seen that gimmick in the Sixth Sense. And also, I don't think if you blow your head off with a gun in your mouth, I don't think you survive. I'm not going to show a picture of this movie. Panic Room, Jodie Foster, and little baby, what's her name? From the Twilight? Little baby, what's her name? Kristen Stewart played Jodie Foster's daughter. She was only like 8 or something. 12. My review of that movie is that it sucked. Then he did Zodiac, which I've touched on before in my video that I just showed you from 7 years ago. I would say that this is his best movie. It doesn't use music very often. It certainly doesn't use it manipulatively. The murders depicted are done in such a sort of casual, filmed in like almost a casual way, where it's really hard to describe. What comes to mind is the murder that takes place in the woods of the guy and his wife. And I think the reason it feels so casual is that the man and his wife they don't take it seriously. They don't realize he's going to kill them. He thinks that they think they're just getting robbed, right? And the fact that there's no music at all. Then he made this stupid movie, I think at the insistence of Brad Pitt, who's not exactly a great mind of our time. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which I think is the worst movie ever made. I really do. Right down to the title. I've joked with friends about how bad this title is. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It sounds so pretentious. Oh, The Curious Case. And I've made jokes about all the stupid titles you could come up with that are like this. For example, The Peculiar Predicament of Peter Petticoat. The Tragic Tale of Toby Taylor. The Stupendous Story of Stephen Stalking. In fact, you could have called that movie any of those titles, and it would have been fine. I mean, in terms of how awful the movie is. We got a whole, 2-hour long movie about a guy who ages backwards, and it doesn't amount to anything. It doesn't mean shit. It's as boring as it sounds. It's uneventful, and you're just supposed to be marveling at the fact that he's aging backwards. It's a one-trick pony. It's an embarrassment to watch. David Fincher should be ashamed of himself. Brad Pitt should be ashamed of everybody involved should be just hanging their head in shame. They should issue a public apology. Then came The Social Network, which I believe was the first time of many where David Fincher hires Trent Reznor. A forgettable movie about a forgettable topic, right? About some stupid kid that accidentally became a billionaire. I mean, who could be more boring than Mark Zuckerberg? But my main takeaway from this movie, the one thing I learned from this movie, was from the screenwriter, Aaron Sorkin. Because the way he writes dialogue is unrealistic, in that the dialogue is filled with clever quips that don't necessarily at all suit the characters he's writing. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say that you're writing a story about a crystal meth addict. Well, they're not going to talk with a very good vocabulary. They're not going to have very clever comebacks. But if Aaron Sorkin was writing them, they would. They'd be having the most witty retorts. And I remember back in the day, maybe 15 years ago, I'm 47 now, I was talking to somebody about the movie, and I was talking about how the dialogue is just so contrived. People don't actually talk like that in real life. And the person I was speaking to said, yeah, and that person I was speaking to mentioned the line, the twins, the Winklevosses. There's a line where one of them says, I'm 6'4", I'm 210 pounds, and there's two of me, right? And the person I was talking to was telling me, he's like, okay, in real life, that person wouldn't have just thought of that line right then. He would have thought of that a long time ago. It wouldn't just be off the cuff like that. Aaron Sorkin also wrote A Few Good Men and some TV show about the President of the United States, and all of the people he's been mocked before about how he just does all these clever lines, and sometimes he reuses them in multiple different projects. You'll see the same line in A Few Good Men that you'll see in say A Social Network. And again, I'll just say clever quips and clever comebacks are a cheap way of writing dialogue. You should be writing for what the character would say. I mean, yeah, you can do it, but don't try to cruise on just that, which is what Aaron Sorkin seems to do. Okay, so that's it. I didn't watch Gone Girl. I didn't watch Mank. Wasn't that a story about his father or something? Or his latest movie, The Killer, which I think was starring Michael Fassbender. Yeah, it's about his father, I think, or something like that. The Mank, but either way, whatever. I think he's probably the best director alive. I just think that he needs good screenwriters. He needs good screenplays in order for himself to succeed, because he's not a writer, so. And he needs to completely disassociate himself with Trent Reznor, because Trent Reznor, I'm sorry, will forever be this wannabe kind of goth, emo dork, who's only famous for being cool when he was, 20 and has no artistic ability. David Fincher hiring Trent Reznor to do the music for his movies feels almost like, you know, bringing your disabled brother with you to hang out with your friends, where there's like, why'd you bring him? Like, he's dragging you down, buddy. Like, why do you feel like you owe it to him to help him so much?